Hello, hello, hello. I think we are live on YouTube. Welcome everybody for Clear Vision Wednesday. I'm Claudia Mühlenweg. I'm a natural vision improvement coach and the founder of creator of the Naturally Clear Vision Method. And every week I'm coming here to bring you some, either teaching you some free vision improvement strategies, or I'm bringing on amazing guests to highlight certain areas of eyesight that you might have never thought about. And today's topic is really dear to my heart. And this has been what I've been prioritizing over the last 4 weeks as I'm doing a launch and I'm, really crazy busy, working crazy hours. But one thing I'm not sacrificing, where I'm not cutting any corners, is sleep. So our topic today, or the title of the talk today, or the presentation, is Shut Eye, a sleep dive into eyesight improvement with Dr. Farah Sultan. And I'm bringing her on, but I do want to introduce you properly, Farah. Let me spotlights for everyone. Let me see. It's always, oops, now I'm gone. Hold on. It's always the strange thing. Anyway, super happy to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, everybody.
So you are a functional medicine medical doctor, and you specialize in hormones and sleep. So tell us a little bit, how did you get into this? Why is sleep such a thing that you feel that it's so important?
Thank you, Claudia, first of all, for having me. And I'm so happy to be here with you and your folks. So my journey started I grew up in India and went to medical school there. And, in medical school, we were so busy all the time. We would do all-nighters, be on call, and sleep was the last thing on your mind. We would easily, unlike what you've been doing in the last several days, it was put in the back burner. And because I was young then, I was able to get through and go to call and class and see patients the next day. But as I got into my late 30s and, I had my first baby when I was 30 years old, but it seemed like my whole entire life and health sort of changed after I had this epiphany. I had this first C-section, which was an emergency C-section. It was some really scary moments where I thought I'd lose my life, my son's life, but we made it, and it really scared me, even though I was getting all this training to go into the real world with real medicine. What it hadn't trained me for was for what happened to my health after that. So I noticed that I was so tired. As it is, I was not sleeping through the night with my baby keeping me up. But then I started noticing other changes in my body, like weight gain and hair loss and fatigue and low sex drive, headaches, postpartum blues. And I didn't know what was going on. So I went to my doctor and she just blew me off and said, oh, everything's normal. It's just part of being a new mom. It's part of being stressed out and being a resident. And I knew that wasn't true because I knew my body. There was something just not right. And then after many years of going to doctors and trying to help myself, despite all the medical training, I finally found functional medicine and found out I had Hashimoto's, where my own thyroid was being attacked by my immune system. And having worked in India in remote villages, doing outreach work in the community, I had acquired parasitic infections, gut issues, I had IBS. But the good thing was, having found out what was wrong and how much of a role stress was playing in all of this, I was able to completely turn things around. And then now going through menopause in the last couple of years, that was a different thing that was going on in my body after the pregnancy and childbirth, and sleep was such a big component of that. But again, when you go back to the drawing board and you do the proper testing, you give your body the support it needs, you pay attention, you take care of the stress, you're able to turn things around. So I just feel if I can do this, I can help others do this. And so can each one of you who is watching this. And with what Claudia does, I totally believe in what she teaches, especially to do with eyesight and vision. But sleep itself has such a huge role to play in it. And I was able to exemplify that from my own story, my own struggles with sleep and fatigue. And that's why I'm here today.
Super happy to have you. Yeah. And so let's bring up, the question, because, I was a single mom. I, used to work in advertising, insane hours. And I would 6 hours of sleep was I was happy if I had 6 hours. And I noticed anything less, my brain was not really functioning. And I even say that sleep deprived drivers are more dangerous, almost as dangerous as people under the influence. So let's talk about how does lack of sleep or poor sleep, because you talked about menopause, and that's also what I noticed: sweating, waking up, I used to go to bed, sleep 8 hours, boom, I wake up. Now I wake up a couple of times a night, not always, but sometimes when I first came to menopause. So what does that have to do with eyesight? Can you just give us a broad brushstroke, and then we get more into the nitty-gritty details?
So definitely studies have proven and shown that both lack of quality of sleep and quantity of sleep have an adverse effect on eyesight and vision. Common things we hear about are, dark circles under the eyes, but more than that, you can actually get blurry vision, which I'm sure people notice when you've been working long hours on a computer screen, which in turn also impacts sleep itself. But when you haven't slept more than at least 5 hours a day, it can affect the clarity of vision. And they've done functional MRIs where they took pictures of the visual cortex, which was impaired with impaired blood flow, and also things like microspasms or twitching of the eyes, dry eyes, eye strain. All of these are known problems in terms of actual vision and eyesight with lack of proper sleep. And then over time, eye strain itself can lead to other problems as well. And then the long-term effects, of course, with sleep deprivation are numerous. So you're more accident prone, even more than being under the influence of alcohol when driving. But other than fatal accidents, there's risk of cardiovascular mortality and morbidity, risk of insulin resistance, blood sugar control is not in balance, but that leads to weight gain and poor metabolism, and of course, endocrine disruption as well.
Yeah, and you brought up so many good points here, because again, sleep is this thing that I just was okay, it's okay, whatever I need is the minimum. But I noticed my vision when I was going through divorce, became a single mom, my vision got really blurry. And like you said, the dark circles under the eyes, and just feeling my brain, somehow, I felt do I have dementia? I was just turned 40, do I lose my mind? So yeah, I know I'm interested a little bit in what is the role of light and the pineal gland? I always screw that one up. Play in what role does that play in improving your vision and your sleep? And I would like to know a little bit more about that, because you touched on light just a little bit.
Yeah.
Oops, you're frozen. Hopefully it's coming back.
Sleep and wake cycle, which is our circadian rhythm or our biological clock, and the pineal gland. So sunlight especially, it directly impacts the retinal cells that then send the signals to the optic chiasma, which is this cross of the main optic nerve right between our eyes. So in cultures like in India and many other cultures, it's referred to as the third eye, but that is also where the pineal gland is located. And that is also where we secrete melatonin as well as serotonin. And so directly our sleep, which has to do with our melatonin levels, is linked to light exposure, especially natural sunlight. And so after the advent of artificial light and people working the graveyard shift at night, it has truly impacted both our sleep as well as our vision, in terms of the light exposure. And that's why it is so important that in the morning, especially within an hour of waking, if we are exposed to the natural sunlight, it'll actually improve our melatonin at night and help us sleep better at night. And in the day, and then at night after sundown. So it's a good idea, especially if you're with your loved ones and you watch a sunset, it actually relieves stress and improves sleep at night. And after dark, keeping the lights low instead of bright lights, because now we can just with the flick of a switch have bright light everywhere. So that can make such a big impact on our quality of sleep. And because of the type of light that we're exposed to matters, with sunlight, we have the full spectrum and the full wavelengths of light that we're exposed to. But at night, with especially smart devices and computer screens and TV screens, we're exposed to blue light, which is so highly stimulating to the retina and to the brain, which can keep you more awake, make you go to sleep later, and not have a restful night's sleep. So that's why use of dark curtains, eye masks, or blue blocking glasses can also really have a significant impact on the quality of sleep. So therefore, light directly has a role to play. And that's why your eyes literally are the windows to your brain, but in turn to your sleep health.
That is, yeah, that's so wonderful. And that is totally in line with what I'm recommending. So you touched a little bit on melatonin, because we know when we have blue light exposure, it stops the release of melatonin. Melatonin makes us tired. So what about, the very popular melatonin supplements? I'm just curious, are you recommending that? Are you not recommending that? Like, what is your take on that?
So under certain circumstances, melatonin does work great. So for example, if you are going to be traveling across time zones to avoid jet lag, it does help. But the timing in which you take those melatonin capsules or tablets also matters. Sometimes the form you take also matters. So when you take a sublingual dissolvable one, it may work better for some people versus others. Sometimes taking a long-acting one, even a tiny dose, may work better than a large dose. And some people, I'm sure you've heard of, will take melatonin and have an adverse reaction to it. They actually get wired and don't sleep as well, or it just doesn't work for them. And that may be because melatonin secretion is naturally affected when you're externally taking melatonin long term. It can actually suppress your own melatonin production. So I'm not a big proponent of recommending long-term use of melatonin, but intermittent use with jet lag is great. And melatonin itself has other properties and anti-inflammatory to actually prevent inflammation. There have been some studies even done on non-sleep uses, like in breast cancer, because it has an effect on those types of cells, but that's not the scope of today's discussion. But too much melatonin can suppress your own melatonin. And sometimes a lower dose will work better than a much higher dose. The quality of supplement does matter too. So if it has incipients in it and is not a good quality source, then that might not also work for you. But there are other things that can help with sleep other than melatonin. So sometimes some people do better if they take the precursors to melatonin. So we know that protein is broken down into amino acids, and amino acids like tryptophan make the 5-HTP or the serotonin, and then that can get interconverted into melatonin. So sometimes, depending on your genetic makeup, it may be just beneficial to make sure you're having a good quality protein with every meal, which actually improves your mood because you're making good amounts of serotonin rather than eating sugary carb-laden foods. You will actually have better mood and better sleep because you have the precursors, the proteins that will make and manufacture your own melatonin. And so sometimes even taking 5-HTP will work better than taking melatonin. But again, if your body is on fire, you're more likely to go down a pathway where instead of making melatonin, you're actually making more inflammatory substances that are keeping you awake, keeping you depressed, and keeping you more vigilant.
Wow, yeah, that was a lot of interesting information. So I used to take melatonin once in a while, and I, like you said, traveling. I only discovered that 5 years ago after traveling to Germany, like frequently for 30 years, and it really helps when you travel. But I want to come back to the dosage too, because I listened to another podcast that I love, and he'd always definitely says it has to be way lower, like just like you said, than whatever is usually commercially available. So and maybe we can't get into the nitty-gritty details. People can always reach out to you as well. But I think I love what you said about if you take that, it suppresses your own melatonin production. And that's what I usually say with like fake tears, for instance, right? Because then you don't create your own tears. And going to the precursor, like 5-HTP and I didn't know that about the protein. So that's interesting because I've heard a lot of people say you should eat more carbs at night because carbs make you tired. So just interesting. So basically you're recommending having more protein, or not more, but having also protein at night as for your dinner.
And even in the day.
Right.
Especially kids, when we're eating croissants and muffins instead of protein, it affects our mood, our focus, all of those.
So I'm curious also, like, my younger daughter, when she was little, she had sleep apnea. And I'm also interested in or like any kind of breathing, because I'm big on breathing too. So from your experience, like how does breathing and sleep apnea or just breathing patterns, how can that affect your sleep? Because some people are mouth breathers. And so, yeah, tell us a little bit about breath. Okay.
Yes. And I love the book, by the way, Breath. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. It's a great read. And in fact, I brought these little tapes that are in the shape of a cross that you can just use for mouth taping. They are like little stickers that basically peel off, and you can just stick it. It's in the shape of a cross, and you can literally put it across your mouth. So but you can use plain sellotape, which is hypoallergenic, and you can actually stick this onto your eye mask and reuse it as well if it's just you using it. So talking about breath and what James Nestor has done all these studies on, sleep apnea, which not in every case, but in a lot of cases is associated with snoring, it has been known to affect every function in our body. So starting with eyesight, your endocrine and hormonal system, your cardiovascular system, your metabolism, all of that. So you are basically not getting enough oxygen to all your vital organs when you have sleep apnea. And even people who are skinny can have sleep apnea. You don't have to be overweight and obese to be diagnosed with sleep apnea. Now, one of the things that can help even before you go get a sleep study or have a CPAP machine put in is that with evolution, our mouth cavities have become smaller, and therefore we've become more of mouth breathers rather than nasal breathers. But if we can train our body to breathe nasally through the nose and stop mouth breathing. Just that simple thing, by doing something like the mouth taping, will actually improve oxygenation and improve blood flow to the brain, to the heart, to the arteries and other vital organs, and has been studied to diminish rates of cardiovascular disease, hypertension, obesity, insulin resistance, but also poor vision, which can happen as a result of obstructive sleep apnea. And of course, if you have significant snoring, definitely recommend getting a sleep study.
So I have a question then. I sleep by myself, and when I do share a room, nobody ever told me, you're snoring. So could people be mouth breathers but not snore? Because usually you don't know how you breathe at night when you're really asleep, right? What is like a sign of mouth breathing? Is that, you listed all these conditions, but is there any way when I wake up in the morning,
Yes.
hey, I've done some mouth breathing? Like I always give the example, when you do a lot of chest breathing, you end up getting with like tight sternocleidomastoid, all these muscles, but what is like a total symptom where you're like, oh, you're a mouth breather? How do you know?
So one simple way is that you're very dry mouth because you're breathing through your mouth. The other is you can tell when you wake up that basically your mouth itself is open. Sometimes it has to just do with your dentition, the way the shape of your mouth is. And I'm the opposite. I'm a clencher. So I am tightly shut always. And so keeping a mouth tape doesn't even make a big difference because I breathe through my nose. But my husband, on the other hand, is different, and I have to kick him at night and tell him to use the mouth tape. But yeah, dry mouth is one. Or if you just feel tired, even though you've slept through the night 9 hours, but you're still waking up feeling tired and not well rested, that's not normal. And so you wonder if you have sleep apnea. So that's something worth getting tested as well. And nowadays, especially since COVID, they have contraptions where, because you want to avoid contamination, they have disposable devices they can mail to you that you can do the testing at home, which is much more like your normal sleeping place rather than going into a sleep lab and sleeping. And it's more comfortable. So it's going to be more in line with how your normal sleep pattern is. So that's something that can be done without having to go to a sleep lab, which I would hate to do that on a regular, normal basis.
Yeah, same here. So if you have a link to that, if you have some kind of place where people can get that, I would, or you maybe put it in the chat and we can put it on YouTube too. So
yes.
I have so many questions about sleep. So first of all, I know we have we have slow sleep, we have the REM sleep, we have all the REM sleep. So, dreams, like sometimes some nights I dream really intensely and other nights it just, there's nothing. So is there like any part of the sleep that's like the most important part for eyesight, or is it just like having that, like, because I've heard about these 90-minute rhythms where it's like, if you wake up in the middle of one of them, then you feel really tired. So what is about all that?
Yes, so we do have cycles through which we go through during the night. And yes, they are about 9 minutes long. And so technically, you could go through about 7 to 8 such cycles during the length of 8 hours or 9 hours of sleep. And so during that time, they have studied the brain waves pattern, as well as a particular phase of sleep where we have the dreams in is, as you know, REM sleep or rapid eye movement sleep, which is a state where we are in deep sleep, but it's almost like if you were to observe someone during that time, it seems like they're awake and their eyes have specific movements called the saccadic movements, and they have been studied extensively, and there's still controversy about it. There's one school of thought that thinks that maybe when we are actually dreaming, has that got something to do with the REM sleep and the movements of the eye? And are we actually tracking our vision? And, you know, you've seen that sometimes some events happen during the day and you're conjuring those visions maybe in a distorted way, in a different manner when you're asleep. So connecting those two together, they were wondering if there was a relationship between dreams and vision and sleep. But what they found was that the two eyes are not always moving in sync with each other. So it's not like you have binocular vision during the sleep, it's more monocular, and it's not in sync with each other. And so but we know for sure that the visual cortex lights up during REM sleep, and that may be why dreams can be so lucid. And again, when you are less stressed is when you sleep deeper, go into REM sleep, and then you're more likely to remember your dreams as well. And a lot of times you'll notice that happens just before you wake up, also in the morning.
Yeah.
And then there's non-REM sleep, which is actually a very deep state of sleep, but we don't dream in that sleep. And so one of the things that can potentially wake you up, like Claudia mentioned, between those 90-minute cycles is when you can come into a more superficial level when it comes to your sleep. And if your melatonin is tanking, it'll wake you up. And that's why sometimes longer acting low dose melatonin works better, because it helps you through those cycles in and out. The other thing is cortisol, which is your stress hormone. So as many people say, I have no trouble falling asleep, but I can't remain asleep. I wake up at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. when I would rather sleep till 6 or 7 a.m. So why is that? So cortisol, a stress hormone, is normally supposed to be rock bottom at night, and it has an opposite relationship to melatonin. So when cortisol goes up, melatonin goes down. And so one of the things we can do, therefore, is if we can mitigate the effect of cortisol, which you don't need any drugs for, you don't need all these addictive prescription medications for sleep to do that, then it can actually, when you put your cortisol down, you naturally improve your melatonin, and then you remain asleep through the night. So when the cortisol also goes up, your busy brain takes over. You know, it's sometimes called the monkey brain, where you think about all these thoughts, and then it's just hard to go back to sleep, because it may be exciting things going on, it may be stressful things that are going on, but it's just hard to shut off the brain and go to sleep. And when you're able to do that, you'll notice you're able to sleep much better. So there are some, and that's why mindfulness, meditation, gratitude, deep breathing, darkness, cool temperatures, all of these help both the physical drive for sleep, but even hormonally, even without taking any hormones, it helps to balance some of these hormones that are likely to keep you up. And Claudia, what you mentioned before about eating carbs, that is in people whose blood sugar is dropping too low in the middle of the night, because insulin, when it's high, will drop sugars too low, which is supposed to do, but that'll wake you up. And therefore, in those individuals, and usually high insulin can be associated with high cortisol, it makes sense to have a good carbohydrate, small amount before bedtime, so you're not going into hypoglycemia and waking up in the middle of the night.
Okay, so I have so many questions. I don't even know where to start. I do want to come back to those saccadic eye movements, because that's something that I teach that is really important for good vision. But let's quickly, before we forget this, so I've heard, and I've noticed that myself. Sometimes, we get into bad habits. I'm stressed right now. And then you want to watch a little bit of Netflix, whatever. Or, and then it's like, those chips that you bought for guests, for the next party that you're like, you grab that. And I notice when I do that, when I eat like just before bed, that I really have poor sleep. Those are carbs. But when you're saying, can you get a little bit more specific in terms of what food would be ideal if
Yes.
you do have that kind of cortisol, if you have that kind of insomnia or waking up? And also, what is the space between the last meal and like when you go to bed? Like, what's the ideal timing there?
Yes. So for eating before bedtime, ideally, I recommend eating your last meal at least 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, especially if you're trying to lose weight, if you have insulin resistance and things like that. On the other hand, if you know that you're going to wake up in the middle of the night and reach for a snack or go check out what's in the fridge because you're starving, then that means maybe you would benefit from eating something. So what could that something be? It could be just a fistful of blueberries. It could be a small cup of, plain yogurt, not with all the artificial flavors and coloring. And if you're dairy sensitive, you can do dairy-free yogurt with maybe a drizzling of blueberries or nuts, or some people like just a slice of an apple with almond butter, or you could have a slice of a sweet potato sprinkled with cinnamon, or you could have like just a bite of a piece of turkey or chicken wrapped in lettuce. So it's not something huge, or even a small amount of protein shake, like a pea protein shake, but not like a whole bunch of it. So anything small which has good fiber, good carbs, or good protein and good fats is good enough.
That sounds wonderful. And yeah, if you have questions on YouTube, make sure I'm looking over here on the YouTube screen, and then I'm looking here in our Clear Vision Club Zoom chat. So I do want to come back before I forget about those saccadic eye movements. So the saccadic eye movements, the faster, the better eyesight is usually. But you talked about, which I didn't know, when I know when you in REM sleep, your eyes are making those movements, right? So and I think they found out that you actually do focus as if you're looking at real objects. But you talked about the eyes not being like paired together, which is usually an indication of, like, if kids try to do that too much, like you can actually screw up your eyesight. So you're saying they found that basically the eyes move independently from each other when we're in this REM sleep. That's kind of creepy.
Yes, they say they were not even in the same plane.
Wow.
And that it's almost like they have uniocular vision, and but that's just a theory. But if that were the case, they think it almost like the brain is split in half, and you would have one eye having one dream and the other eye having another dream, which also doesn't make sense. So that's why they're trying to study that. Why is that they are not roving together or smoothly in that saccadic movement, which is always supposed to be synchronized? Why is that not happening specifically in REM sleep? Because their normal vision is not like that. It's not that they have any paralysis or any impaired vision or squint vision or any of that.
So I don't know if you know all the details of this, but now I'm getting really interested in this, because I know with astigmatism, right, when we have the outer eye muscles, that oftentimes some muscles are tighter, some muscles are more loose. So when they did this REM sleep study, did the eyes always move like horizontally, or which, eye movement desensitive? I always screw that up. But there's a therapy where you do those. Francine Shapiro discovered that where you do that, because as humans, we're usually horizontal eye scanners. Right, we don't have many predators.
Yes.
So is that also like where the movements, like, horizontally, or were they all over the place?
They were actually all over the place.
Really?
So they were in different planes. So not only horizontally, but even vertically, and in all the kind of 3D way, the way you showed the eyeball, they found that the movements were all over the place, and that's why it was so perplexing.
That is so, oh my God, I have to dive deeper into that topic. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm just, okay, other things I hear a lot of times. So, I do teach that too. When people, let me backtrack. I always say, when is your vision best? When is it worse? And sometimes most people say, oh, in the afternoon after being on the computer, whatever. But sometimes I have clients that say, my vision is actually worse in the morning. When I wake up, my eyes feel like rock hard, or they feel dry, or it's all blurry. So what is your take on that? Like, what does that mean?
So definitely, I do correlate that with good sleep. So if you are sleeping well through the night, then your brain during that time is performing almost like a detox. It's doing this mop-up operations and cleaning up, and your retina is part of that process. So even your retina gets rid of waste materials, if you will. In fact, there's one theory that melatonin was originally a waste material from the retina, which then combined with vitamin A by the rhodopsin, the pigment for night vision. And that's how melatonin got linked to night sleep. So, but poor sleep can result in poor detox. So when you get puffy eyes, those are your lymphatics around your eyes that are not draining that well. And that's why when you don't sleep well, this whole lymphatic system that the original theory was that the brain is completely shut off from the rest of the body by the blood-brain barrier. But studies showed, based from studies from the University of Rochester, that there is this lymphatic system in the brain that freely communicates, especially with the gut, because about the brain-gut connection, the vagus nerve and the vagal tone and the parasympathetic tone. And so when we don't sleep, we are not retaining our memories. We are not cleaning out like the waste and the toxins. And therefore, we may wake up with puffy eyes, blurry vision, dry eyes, all of those symptoms. So having just the hours in is not important, but getting the restful sleep in is important as well.
That is so interesting. I mean, I've always had best vision in the morning, and I was always like proud to be like a super good sleeper. I fall asleep right away. But since menopause, so let's talk a little bit about that, because I need my bedroom super cool. I need my sister and I the same way. We can be in below freezing temperatures, and we open the window, and every time I share a room with somebody, they're like, no, I'm like, yes. No. when I have a closed room and it's kind of on my eyes, I do get that puffiness under the eyes. So and you talk about eye masks. So I do have I use a black foam core piece of wood that I put in front of my window, because my neighbors have this super bright porch light and they're not willing to, whatever, that's a different discussion. But so what are your recommendations in terms of when you wake up? Like because since menopause, and I always thought I would just woke up because I had to go to the bathroom. And then I realized, no, when I woke up, I was actually sweating. I was hot, even though I had the cool room. So is there any kind of tips in terms of that you would give somebody like me who is in menopause? And sometimes I wake up once, sometimes twice, and really bad nights, it could be 4 times. But what can we do in order to avoid that getting up so many times?
Right. And so definitely hot flashes can, of course, be from menopause, but they can also be from some other factors. So one of those factors is actually your blood sugar not being stable. So stabilizing your blood sugar actually minimizes hot flashes. The other is stress levels. Sometimes you can be taking, postmenopausal bioidentical hormones, but you can still have hot flashes if you're stressed out. So they may not happen all the time. And so that's why if we want to do some things without having to take hormones, what are those? So definitely cooler temperatures are known to help even without menopause, because that's why taking a warm bath just before going to bed, but then keeping the temperatures almost chilly at least 68 degrees Fahrenheit will help you get a better night's sleep. And keeping the room dark for sure. But some of the other things that I love in terms of supplements, for example, are magnesium, because most Americans are probably maybe not subnormal, but suboptimal when it comes to magnesium. And then I love theanine. So theanine is a green tea extract without any caffeine, but it's quickly absorbed and absolutely has no side effects. I even give it to kids because it helps your brain focus and just tone down that busy brain and help you remain asleep without having to wake up in the middle of the night.
Okay, I just looked at YouTube, so there was some questions there. So theanine and magnesium, I put that in the chat. I do balance my blood sugar since the last 5 years, and so it's gotten a lot better for me, but sometimes I do wake up. Anyway, and quick question, because I hear this too, like, not everybody has the luxury of air conditioning. Some people like live in, warmer temperatures in the summer. What about fans? Because I sometimes hear like, when the eyes are not totally closed, you can actually get dry eyes from the fan running. And then, I put a mask on, but are there any tips in terms of if it is warm, you have no AC, or you don't want to spend that money, or whatever the reason is, like, what are some tips if it is pretty warm at night? Like, how can you, what would you usually recommend?
Yeah.
Oops, you're frozen. Okay.
So definitely use the natural air conditioning, which is to open your windows and use light sheets, because we tend to use blankets because we may be a little cold falling asleep, but then in the middle of the night we get hot and then we're throwing off our covers at night. And dress lightly. But fans are okay, but not at full speed. At a lower speed, they will maintain a cooler temperature, but not be blowing air where it's drying your skin and your face and your eyes as well.
Okay, so we have some questions coming up. Is there anything that we have not said yet that you do want to get in before we get to questions? Because I see some questions coming. Anything that you feel like you've covered so much already. So this is such a fascinating topic.
Yeah, so definitely one of the things that if you're open to it, that I do find to be game changing is to check your hormone levels, to actually just see where is my thyroid at, because again, thyroid up or down can also lead to hot flashes. And just checking your cortisol in your saliva, not in your blood, and just knowing where you are with your hormones, because sometimes young women can get hot flashes too. They don't have to be in menopause. So just knowing those numbers in term, and it can be in urine, it can be in saliva, it can be in blood, whatever works with you and your practitioner, can really help you balance them better. And you can do it naturally. And I do bioidentical hormones too, which are specifically compounded to each individual person's needs. So sometimes if other things aren't working, especially in women, especially with progesterone, which is a neuroprotective hormone. So in Europe, actually, they allow the use of progesterone for traumatic brain injury and strokes. Not in the US, it's not FDA approved, but it's that much neuroprotective. And that's why it helps with mood, memory, sleep, brain fog, all of those things, which we tend to lose, especially after menopause.
So I know some people want to know how much magnesium to take. So I don't know if you have recommendations. I know you offer a complimentary consultation also, because I think there's so many questions that we cannot all get to, but do you have like a recommendation of magnesium as an example, like what people?
Yes, so the form of magnesium, first of all, really matters. Do not get magnesium oxide, which is what's usually found over the counter. You want to get a chelated form of magnesium, which is going to be quickly absorbed, like glycinate or malate. And usually you go up in increments of 200 milligrams. You can go up to 2 grams or 2000 milligrams a day as long as your bowels are okay. So if you get to the point of having loose bowels, that means you need to back off. So that's a very easy and rough way to know how much magnesium you're lacking and needing.
Great. And we do have some questions about, first of all, I want to come back to that test you said earlier about sleep. If you have, if you can put that in the chat while I'm talking, if you have some resource or some links, that would be great.
I put it there. It's called Itimar, ITIMAR, is the name of it's an Israeli company that made the Apple Watch-like device. And they may have been bought over by another company, but you'll still find it if you find Itimar, ITIMAR, is the home sleep testing device.
Okay, that's a great idea. And then also there's a question here about, I'm trying to manage all the different chats. What is a good home saliva test? And specifically, you said the saliva test would be, well, there's all kinds of tests, but I forgot, what did you mention the saliva test and specifically?
So for the cortisol, you can do what is called a 4-point or 5-point saliva test. So normally just before you wake up, your cortisol goes up in what is called CAR, or cortisol awakening response. So not every salivary test measures that. There are a few. And then it measures one in the morning, one at noon, one in the afternoon, and one at bedtime. So that's what it's a tiny tube it comes in. And there are many companies that do that. Sometimes you have to go through a registered practitioner to get it. But there are others that are available online. Some of the companies that I have worked with and used before are Labrix, DDI from DDI, Genova Diagnostics, the common ones that a ZRT that I know of, but there are many others as well. But that's a good way, because you're not going to go to your doctor's office and get your lab drawn 4 times a day. That'll drive you crazy. Right, and no doctor's office is going to be open that long till your bedtime. So yeah, that's an easy, simple home test to check your cortisol.
Right. I've done a Dutch test, which is a urine test, and that also, the complete Dutch test also.
I like the Dutch, yes.
Cortisol, yeah. Those tests are not inexpensive, and but you can, if you have somebody helping you you can actually get them and do them at home, but usually the insurance doesn't pay for those things. Oh my God, we have so many questions. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, this is such a great topic. So I'm so glad you came on today. So let's see, there was a question, any suggestions for waking up early in the AM and not being able to go back to sleep? I think we covered that a little bit, but I think it's more about addressing the root cause of why this is happening, right? Versus like the Band-Aid at that moment, or do you have any? Yeah.
So basically your cortisol is just that normal cortisol awakening response is just happening at 5 a.m. instead of 6 a.m. And so one thing is go to the bathroom always, because then you don't want to fall asleep and then wake up again to go to the bathroom and then come back. So some of the non-supplement, non-medicinal things that you can do are just focus on your breath. You can meditate. You can listen to guided meditation or music if you're not one to be able to focus on your breath or any one thing. I love some of the assisted apps like Headspace, Calm, and Insight Timer, but there are many others, and there are many free ones on YouTube. And you can actually still take your theanine in the morning, because it does not make you feel drowsy. The way it works is calms your brain. So you can even take this at 10 o'clock in the morning in your office if you want to focus and not be distracted. So I had this whole office of computer geeks who would keep their bottle of theanine there so they could focus on their work and on projects to get done. So it's not a sedative. It's an adaptogen, and it works by lowering that cortisol response and the busy brain. So you'll sleep deeply and not wake up drowsy.
That is awesome.
Even for another hour.
That is awesome. So that's theanine is basically, is that the green tea extract? Yeah.
Yes, without the caffeine. Yeah.
Right. So you can get that over the counter, right? That's a good tip.
Yeah. So the best gold standard one throughout America, which other companies buy that theanine to make their own, is sun theanine. SUN theanine is the the actual manufacturer.
The sunshine.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Awesome. Okay, so that's a great tip. Good. I didn't know that. I love learning new things too. Let's see. We talked about magnesium. Any suggestions to improve natural tongue rest posture for sleep? The tongue.
Yes, that's a great question. Posture does matter. So if you are a side sleeper, then it does help to have a pillow between your knees, because that makes your spine more sort of even. Make sure your pillow is not too high and too low, just in where it's comfortably and not putting a strain on your neck. If you are someone who sleeps on their back, you may want a little pillow underneath your knees, again, to give your lumbar spine a bit of a break. And if if you're pregnant, then definitely they have special pregnancy pillows. And if you are one to those sleep on your stomach, that can actually put a little more strain on your neck when your neck is turned to either side.
So basically, your spinal alignment will help your tongue to be okay. That's a great idea. So we have some questions here on Zoom in my Clear Vision Club, and we will have a little bit extra time to chat, but I do want to, some of the really good questions I think are helpful for everybody on YouTube as well. So if you tape your mouth, would you have to breathe through your nose? Could this be a rough test? There's a question here.
Yes, so you can do that. Yes. And initially, you want it. So don't be afraid that, oh, what if I cough? What if I sneeze? You will still have the space in between. So you can literally put a single tape in the middle. So the sides of the mouth are still open for coughing and things like that. It may take a couple of weeks to get used to it. But yeah, you can, just doing that simple technique, become a nose breather, or find out if you're a nose breather or a mouth breather.
Yeah, I love that suggestion. Let's see. I think we already had that question. Just scanning here really quickly. We talked about the saliva test. So yeah, I don't see any. Okay, there is one new question. Not having the sheets tucked in at the bottom of the bed so that my feet can poke out. Yeah, that's the first. We don't do that in Europe. It's really strange. When I first moved to America, I'm like, why are they doing that? The first thing I do in every hotel is like, get those sheets away and have. It's so hilarious. So I think we covered all the questions. I do have one thing I do like to use if I sometimes my mind, like monkey mind, I like just, white noise, like raindrops.
Yes.
Or yoga nidra, non-rest deep sleep is also something that which is not supposed to get you into sleep, but sometimes I find it's a great way to kind of fall. Are you agreeing with that, or?
Yes, and actually the fan can work both ways. It can add that white noise, right, and help you keep cool.
Okay. Well, that was super, super interesting. And so in the YouTube description, there's a link for a free masterclass that you can watch. And then also you can book a complimentary consultation with Dr. Farah if you want to. If that helps, if you want to dive deeper into the sleep, I like the joke, sleep dive. But if you want to do a little deep dive into the sleep and find out a little bit more what causes you not to sleep well, because it is such an important piece of our health is sleep. Really, it's to me, it's the foundation, right? Okay.
It is.
So I think we covered that about the mouth breather. So thank you so much for being here. And
oh, you're welcome.
And we will continue a little bit on Zoom with the Clear Vision Club peeps, but bye on YouTube. And thank you so much. Make sure to subscribe to my channel.
Bye-bye.
Subscribe to Dr. Farah's channel. I don't know if your channel, we haven't linked that, but I'm sure that, can they find you on YouTube? Like what's your YouTube link?
It's either Farah Sultan MD or Vitalogy Wellness, and I can put it in the chat. I don't know.
I can put that in
Vitalogy Wellness, Vitalogy Wellness.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So thank you so much. And bye, YouTube. We will see you again next week. And thank you so much for being here and sharing your knowledge about sleep. That was super.